We are back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, you got to talk about the draft, man. Especially from the Seahawks perspective, because this class is honestly one of the better ones the franchise has had since I've been a fan of the team. So to just get straight into it, obviously they held the 18th overall pick, and initially I mocked them to get Tyler Booker, but I ended up being dead wrong because he was already off the board at that time. But they would do something that I could certainly get behind, drafting Dre Zabel, tackle from North Dakota State. The man, first off, is legitimately a unit. He's like 6'5", like 312 or something. So that already just adds to the physicality of the fucking unit. But then you recognize as well, yeah, 6'6", 312. Crazy. But then you also add in his versatility because, I mean, he was initially listed as a tackle on mock sites. And then when he's drafted, they say that he's a guard/center. And either way you slice it, interior offensive linemen are certainly needed. So if the combine buzz that he got after the way he smashed it is anything to go off of, he's got some very good potential to develop gracefully for an organization that has needed top-end talent at the offensive line position for years now. It will only help in terms of being able to protect quarterbacks because, like, even Geno Smith last year was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league, and he's much older. You do not want to put Sam Darnold in that position. I'm just being completely honest. And that's a great way to start out the draft, too, because you got to figure they didn't end up making any moves for any, like, major offensive linemen or so in free agency, though, again, all the big names in free agency when it comes to those positions were just gone. Nobody else was really left outside of Jedrick Wills Jr., and I suppose that given some of his issues with injuries, maybe they just were not willing to give him a shot there. But either way, with something that is so pressing, to take a pretty good and calculated risk on a player like this is pretty respectable, and I believe that it can pay off. So that was a great way to start it off. I could totally get behind it. And then, even with that pick being as great as it was, as necessary as it was, shit would just heat up from there. I mean, round 2, I think they opened up with the 42nd overall pick or so. But they traded up with the Titans to acquire the 35th overall pick. And with it, they would select a dog. Now, honestly, when it comes to this player, I got scared about their chances of getting their hands on South Carolina safety defensive back Nick Emanwari. Because I'm not going to lie, I thought that he would have also been gone with how things shaped up. Obviously, I didn't mock him to go in the first round. Probably was a bit ill-advised. But at the same time, I thought that if anybody was going to try to go for him in the first round, the Ravens had a great chance of getting him when I mocked this. And honestly, with how the draft was developing, there was a real chance that they were just gift-wrapping his draft rights to the Ravens. But instead, they decided to take their chances with Malachi Starks, who, again, is a very great and versatile safety in his own right. But I thought they were going to get him. I got so scared. Thank goodness they didn't, though. There were still some hurdles to be cleared because, honestly, you could argue that even the Eagles as well were in the running to get themselves a safety like him because they lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Texans by a trade. So, but that shit, like, man, just, oh my goodness. That would have been pretty crazy. But instead, before any other team even got so much as a look at Amon Wari, they decided to trade up from number 52 overall to number 35 and nabbed him instantly. And I'm gonna say this right now. He's gonna ball out with him. I already know it. From what I have seen, obviously not a ton of South Carolina games overall, but he appears as though he is also extremely versatile with tremendous ball skills, good coverage. His athleticism was ranked as one of his better qualities as well, and he also killed the fucking combine too and shot up draft boards in a similar vein. So he really had first round potential, but that's not how things shaped up. For the Seahawks to compound on that chance to get him by being aggressive, by moving up 17 spots. Because honestly, prior to that, there were a few teams who probably could have been in the running for him, and it wouldn't have been too surprising. But they didn't even let any other team get the chance. They just attacked right then, right there, and you gotta appreciate that from Johnson Schneider. It's a hell of a fucking play. And Nick is gonna love it here. Like, bro, he's literally got the Derwin James Jr. comp over the course of some months now, and I can honestly see it. He's been on record saying one of his favorite players was Cam Chancellor. The connection is just there already, and he hasn't even taken a snap. So the sky is definitely the limit for him. No question about it. The next pick in the second round would see them with the 50th overall pick take tight end Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. And I was kind of questioning it initially, but at the same time it does make sense. Because, let's be honest, I mean, outside of blocking duties, Pharaoh Brown didn't do a lick with this team. So naturally, he was let go over the course of the offseason. And Arroyo at least offers the potential to be just another very good receiving threat that the Seahawks might need at that position. It's a solid trio to have right now with the way that Arroyo has performed at Miami. I've seen a few plays of him over the course of this year. You know, we'll have to see how the speed translates, but, you know, he's a big body, so the chances of reining in certain footballs compared to some of the other players of the team are naturally going to be heightened a little bit with his catch radius and his overall stature. You know, we'll have to see about him as a blocker, of course, but in terms of the receiving game, you have Noah Fant there, and A.J. Barner is still there currently, and now you add in Arroyo as a tertiary option if need be. It's not a bad idea whatsoever. You know, we'll definitely see what he's made of, but I didn't have a problem with this pick either for what was needed at the time. And boy, oh boy, if you thought round 2 was crazy, in round 3, they would do one of the craziest things imaginable. In a move that, honestly, in the circle around me over the past few months, even at the start of the college football season last year, different people were making allusions to the notion of the Seahawks getting quarterback in the mid-rounds because they didn't trust Geno Smith at all. And I was just putting it to the side. I didn't think they would actually go on and do it. But then with moving on from Geno Smith and taking on Sam Darnold, I'm like, okay, like something's got to give, man, because I still don't know if I necessarily trust it. So if there is a chance for you to get somebody in the mid-rounds, you do take it. I was thinking it was going to be a person like Will Howard. Other people were saying Jalen Milroe. But I just wasn't buying it. The pick was announced by none other than Sean Alexander, and I couldn't tell you the amount of shock and just pure raw emotion I had with watching his name get announced and seeing none other than Jalen Milroe get drafted by the Seahawks with the 92nd overall pick in the 3rd round. I was going ballistic in there. I could not contain myself. It was quite literally one of the craziest moments I've seen play out. Like, I was totally surprised, but I totally saw the vision. And ain't that poetic? Sean Alexander, former Alabama superstar, obviously being a part of that team for so long and doing great things with the Seahawks for many years, doing potentially the same deed by passing on the torch to another Alabama potentially superstar, depending on who you ask, who had done pretty historic things in Alabama, even though Milroe did finish off his tenure there on very sour terms. Because, that's the thing. Like, Milroe is a pretty damn good prospect when you really look at it. When it comes to dual threat ability, when it comes to his strong arm, and when it comes to his rushing ability. 20 rushing touchdowns last season on an insane amount of fucking yardage. Like, that in a Seahawks offense is dangerous. And it literally does remind me of Russell Wilson in a way. The problem with Jalen Milroe is accuracy and consistency, because there were games last season, especially against better competition in the SEC, where he struggled mightily. Now, it wasn't like the situation in, I guess, the 2023 season where he got himself benched early. It never got to that point. But it was just hell to watch if you were an Alabama fan in some of these games. Like the Tennessee game, where he just essentially gave it away with all of the mistakes that he ended up making during that one. Or even, I guess, more pressing on some people's minds, the Oklahoma game that I continue to cite over and over and over again as the reason why Alabama didn't even get a chance in the CFP rankings in a couple of the college football videos that I had at the tail end of last year, early few days of this year, in fact. And even more recently, the game against Michigan to cap off his college career. They had chance after chance to win it, but mistake after mistake made by him leading the way cost them tremendously. And somehow, someway, Michigan was able to defeat them in that bowl game. So, it was, like again, Alabama fans are certainly spoiled. This was the first season without Saban, of course. So it was going to be a process. But even then, for their standards, they were severely disappointed with him. So you have to keep that in mind. But at the same time, his potential is very, very real. And it is, honestly, it could be as high as he truly wants it to be. He's not going to get the starting job right away. He's going to be sitting behind Sam Darnold. Now, is that a person you want to necessarily be learning from? Let's see how Sam Darnold plays. And that's the beauty of it, honestly. If Sam Darnold doesn't play well, from what I saw, apparently the contract has a clause in which the team can opt to move on from him after just 1 year if things don't work out. So then, in thinking about it that way, to have Milroe as a potential contingency plan in the right situation, he may truly be able to come through and flourish as a legitimate quarterback in this league. There, again, obviously the doubts are fair, but bro, there's just too much potential within him to pass up at that moment of time. And for what is the potential that the pick poses, honestly, it was a very smart move to acquire him. I think so, at least. And man, I'm excited about it. Now again, obviously, any number of things could happen. He may not even end up taking a snap for the team. But if this process is sought through, ain't no telling where that could take this football team. Straight up. Their next picks wouldn't come until the 5th round, where they would start things off by trading down, sending Sam Howell away from the team, over to the Vikings to acquire the 142nd overall pick, which they would use to select Riley Mills, defensive tackle from Notre Dame. Picking up Riley Mills honestly makes sense to me. Seeing some Notre Dame games and getting a little bit of exposure to him in the national championship, it seems like he's also a pretty good blue chip prospect, in my opinion. And with the amount of losses they took at the defensive tackle position, it would be very helpful to shore things up there. Not to mention as well, a lot of that core wasn't even really versatile to the point where you had to have Leonard Williams take interior snaps in some cases. And honestly, that's fair because that's a testament to how he is as a player. But at the same time, as he continues to get older, you probably don't want to keep putting him in those positions. So to ensure some sort of reasonable and truly dependable depth pieces back there would be pretty great. Also, there is a good chance that he can develop very well alongside Byron Murphy II as well, which would certainly be tremendous for the future outlook of the team as well. Round 5 would also see them grab a couple more players, the first of which being Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State with the 166 overall pick. Once more, pretty solid one because, let's be real, Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to be a very short-term solution to the just grave task of trying to find a player who can replace Tyler fucking Lockett. He's a very short-term solution. He's only got a 1-year contract, so he's not going to be there long anyways. And honestly, even with him being there, I'm not expecting a lot from him. I mean, you have Cooper Kupp, obviously, and you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. Most of his activity last season came in the slot. There are cases in which he could be the number 2 or number 1 wide receiver. And honestly, in fact, that is an interesting thing to think about. That is an interesting thing to think about. Because technically, when you look at it, Cooper Kupp is the quintessential slot receiver as well. So this offensive makeup could be pretty interesting. I don't know. But I guess the way I see it, you can have Cooper Kupp or Jackson Smith and Jigba pretty much anywhere at this point. I don't see Torrey Horton III running a slot option. I would see him as the number 2 receiver on like a given formation and maybe get some reps at slot. But those reps at 1 and maybe the slot are mostly going to be occupied by Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp anyways. Probably Cooper Kupp more so. I mean, when you really think about it. His best season, by far one of the best wide receivers seasons of all time, came with him dominating from the slot. Obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba is capable of the same thing, But, I mean, I think they saw good things from him last year. Personally, with the games that I watched, as a true number one wide receiver in games where maybe DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett were injured or they weren't necessarily getting things going. He actually stepped up in that role pretty well, even if he might be considered by most as a slot guy. But I do personally feel that Cooper Kupp, honestly, would occupy that position. So, that's pretty interesting. It's a good problem to have, though. Ray Horton, again, accomplished career at Colorado State. I don't necessarily know if he will end up, he's not going to be the main guy, but as a piece for the future post and maybe even during a bit of Marquez Valdes-Scantling's time here to add another potential playmaker in there is a smart move to a team that will be reeling for at least a little bit of time without DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett's services there. We're just recuperating there, so that makes perfect sense. They would also, with the 175th overall pick, draft tight end Robbie Uch from Alabama. And as soon as they made the pick, I was like, I didn't have a problem with it, but his ass is a blocker. Straight up, he's a blocker. There's no question about it. He's a blocker. And even as I have this reference page for all the picks here, even they refer to him as a fullback. He is a blocker through and through. Alabama's rushing attack had consistently been in the upper echelon of teams in the nation when he was there, and obviously having Jalen Milroe be a part of such a dynamic rushing attack last season certainly helps his cause as being a legitimate position player when it comes to that role. No doubt about it. Now, when it comes to anything outside of that, it's just like good luck with that. Straight up. He, at his combine, combine numbers aren't necessarily everything. They can help, granted, but they aren't necessarily everything. The slowest players at the tight end group by far during the 40-yard dash process was dropping multiple passes when it came to some of the drills. And even during his last college football season, when it comes to his time at Alabama, he had career-high numbers, and we're talking about him just barely getting over 100 yards receiving in just under 10 catches. That's not going to be a true sort of material for any legitimate tight end. So it makes much better sense for him to be a blocker. And honestly, you see fullbacks, you don't always see fullbacks get straight up drafted. But with him being a part of a dynamic rushing attack, and when you imagine that the team is doing their best to try to fortify their run blocking unit under their offensive scheme, it fits very well. So again, for another positional need to add to better play protection, it makes perfect sense. 6th and 7th round, see them shore up a little bit. They would get guard Bryce Cabeldue from Kansas with the 192nd overall pick in the 6th round. I did not necessarily hear too much about him, but again, when blocking last season for Devin Neal, one of the best running backs in the nation when it came to overall production, that kind of resume alone speaks for itself, even with me not having too much intel on him. So it's a solid move to just continue adding to depth at that position because they desperately need it. They would draft Demi Martinez, running back from Miami, with the 223rd overall pick in the 7th round. And I don't necessarily know what to think about this one. I mean, I think he would be used as a depth piece because, you still have Kenneth Walker III, obviously, he's not going anywhere. And then you have Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh there as well. So, I mean, I guess any one of those other guys is interchangeable, but I don't know. I'd figure after having Charbonnet step in for Walker III in a few games last season and play relatively well, I think he would be secure as a direct backup, number 2 in that depth chart. And then I guess it's really up for battle between McIntosh and Martinez. But even then, it's not like McIntosh played the worst. It's just a matter of getting him more reps. So we'll see how Martinez fits in this offense. That's still not a terrible pick for the 7th round. 234th overall pick would see them pick up Mason Richmond, tackle guard from Iowa, in the 7th round. Once more, just adding to it. And you know what they say about the Iowa tight ends, but do you know what they say about the Iowa offensive tackles? I mean, let's be honest, Tristan Wirfs Jr. serves as a benchmark for that right now as legitimately one of the best, if not the best, offensive tackles in the league by far. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Richmond is going to have that same kind of trajectory, but as long as he can be a very capable piece at the tackle position, maybe eventually usurping Abraham Lucas for years to come, has all the value we can ask for from a 7th rounder. And then with the 238th overall pick, they would select Ricky White III, wide receiver out of UNLV, with the 7th round. He also, over the past couple of years, has produced one of the highest yardage totals in the FBS with UNLV, and was even named a Conference Special Teams Player of the Year last season as well. And I think that's kind of the value that he's going to have for this team. Again, adding more depth to the wide receiver room, similar to what they had in, I guess, the years with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, with some of the guys that they had coming in and out of the roster, just to be somewhat complementary and serviceable pieces for the team, aside from those two, alongside those two even. But as a special teamer, if he's that great, it helps tremendously, because something had to give after whatever the fuck was going on with the unit last season. I mean, especially when it comes to Laviska Shenault Jr. I mean, bro, that damn Jets game was so terrible from that perspective of the roster that he didn't even end up seeing through the full regular season with the team, because they cut his ass right after that. Don't want a repeat of that this year. So to take a flyer on an individual who has the prowess to do so, has an accolade of some kind, to at least back it up, it's a good chance to have. And again, if things don't pan out, there's not necessarily a lot of risk with investing in that this late. So again, another great pick. And again, overall, I think the Seahawks personally had one of the best drafts in the NFL this year. One of the best classes by far, like they have been doing over at least 2 out of the past 3 or so drafts. They've been killing the game. It's just about bringing it all together. That's really what it comes down to. Because again, with that, with them being good and a lot of the draft picks developing very well over the past few years. Hell, I'll even say 3 out of the past 4 draft classes, they've been killing it and they've been working towards it. But the results have been relatively similar, with just barely above 500 records and just continuously missing out on the postseason. So the only way to continue getting better is to just try and continue to see the process through, level up every single year. And it feels like they are getting even closer. But obviously, again, the regular season can provide much uncertainty. We don't even know what the full schedule will be like, or won't know it until May 14th. So anything is truly possible. It'll just be up to really seeing everything break down over the course of the next season. And even through training camp, there are going to be some guys on the active roster who don't even make the final cut prior to the start of the regular season. But it's just about finding that perfect unit that can get the job done, potentially, more often than not. There are some other developments that did break that I will get into, and then there's also something else related to the draft that I'll talk about in this one. There's a good chance that, a lot of pretty crazy shit happened in this draft that I want to touch on. So I might be making more videos on it in the days to come, but we will see. Anyways, to start out, Hunter Renfrow would be signed by the Panthers, which is pretty interesting when you think about it, because to have Adam Thielen there already as an outside threat, one of the things that they had struggled with for a while is separation. So I don't necessarily think that Hunter Renfrow is known as the fastest guy, and that might create more issues there. Even then, still, when it comes to slot receivers, at least for a time, Hunter Renfrow was solidified as one of the better ones you could have in the league. His 2021 season saw him put up career highs with 103 receptions and his career high 1,038 yards with 9 touchdowns. He nabbed the Pro Bowl for it, and it was well deserved too. Now, ever since then, things have gone downhill. First and foremost, he did miss all of last season because he was dealing with an autoimmune condition that made him just completely ill. He wasn't necessarily maintaining the same physical frame that he had, which, he wasn't necessarily the biggest guy in the world already. So that was certainly a scary moment in time. There was no way that he was going to be able to do much of anything while dealing with something like that. He would recover from it, and as a result, the Panthers would take their chances on him. It makes sense, again. With what he can provide for you as a third wide receiver on a roster, can't necessarily be cast aside. And for a team that desperately needs to find weapons to surround Bryce Young with, understanding that you're not necessarily going to get the biggest names to come to Carolina, taking a flyer on someone who had that kind of output, even if it was for just a little bit of time, could be all the difference in not just Bryce Young's career, but how that offense is able to generate certain play calls over the course of an entire year. So it's definitely, there's a risk there, but the rewards seem to be able, at least from the outside looking in, to exceed them if things go according to plan. The most important thing about it is that he is feeling better now. After dealing with all of those health conditions. That's not necessarily something you want to be having someone deal with, but recovering from it, getting your mind right, your body right, is ultimately the most important thing here. With that being said, you can also attribute it to him being phased out of the Raiders' offense. The next 2 years alone saw him putting up the lowest totals of his career by far. 61 total receptions over the course of the last couple years in which he played, And in a 17-game season in 2023, he only started 3 games, putting up just 255 yards and not scoring a single time. Now, I don't necessarily know why the Raiders would try to do everything in their power to incorporate every other player imaginable into the offensive game plan outside of Hunter Renfrow. That's just unexplainable to me. I don't necessarily have an answer for that question, but there is quite literally a noticeable drop-off. So, as unfortunate as it is overall, even before the autoimmune condition kicked in, it might have been having some effect on him beforehand. We don't necessarily know when exactly this came into the fray for him, but all we can say is that clearly the Raiders were not going to continue to be invested in him long term after all of this, because the production was no longer there, and they really didn't seem to care about ensuring that the volume retained there. It coincided as well with them bringing in guys like Jakobi Meyers, who honestly occupies a similar role. And in looking at that, that is a tremendous gap on their end. You see Renfrow perform like that, and in hopes of getting better, you get another slot player who is much taller, honestly, in Jakobi Meyers. Because when you look at it, Myers is like, 6'2"? But he plays the same way. And seeing, you immediately screwed yourself over at that point. Yeah, they brought him over in 2023, and he goes on and just steals all of the reps from him. So clearly they weren't invested in him for the long term. It's unfortunate, but hopefully with the Panthers, you can make good on the opportunity to just play football again, have fun out there. That's the most important thing. And, just continue to perform in the way that you can. That's what matters the most. That's why the Raiders are dealing with the wide receiver issues that they have now, even with bringing over Diontae Adams as well, and then now losing him, having to recoup there. That's what they get. The Commanders announced, with Josh Harris stating this as well, they will officially return to the RFK Stadium location in the next few years, and Josh Harris says that a new stadium at that site will be ready to go by 2030. Just a mere few months after the federal grant was passed by DC, allowing the Commanders to have access to the RFK Stadium location and granted them the ability to do whatever they want with it for the next 99 years. This literally came to fruition in December of last year, and I touched on it. In just 4 or so months later, here we are. They're already making plans to reuse it again. Now, I'm sure it will not be called that again. They're going to find a new brand to pair up with, and that will take over the rights to the stadium, of course, sponsorships and all that. Like, RFK is definitely like a very old, honestly, I want to say that RFK is like defunct right now. So there's just, hold on, RFK, I think it's a defunct organization. So I don't necessarily believe that they could operate with that sponsor anymore anyways, but hey. Oh, well, no. Yeah. Okay, no, it's not necessarily a brand. But, I mean, they should be okay. Still, though, I guess, I don't know. Okay, and seeing that, I suppose they could do any number of things with it. But we'll see. Either way, football's going to be headed back there. The most important thing is just making sure that they do exceptionally well with setting up the structure, with setting up accommodations and things like that, because obviously it underwent demolition, so it's not going to be in the greatest shape right now. There is a major rebuilding and revamping process that needs to take place. They need to get it done correctly. This is not something that you can screw up. Like, for some Commanders fans out there, they were old enough to have attended a string, maybe even seasons, decades worth of ball games at RFK Stadium. You gotta do it right, especially for those guys. Like, there's so much nostalgia that potentially is in play for those people. And to now have a chance to bring that back, you gotta do it right. You owe that to your fan base. You owe it to them. And I think that under this group with Harris and Johnson, as long as they pair up with the right contractors, because that's also important too, I think they are going to be able to get it done. Because again, nothing gets worse than how Snyder managed renovations at FedEx Field for all of these fucking years under his shitty ass tenure. It is still just a great thing to know that he is no longer an owner in the NFL. Man, it's just a great thing to be reminded of, because niggas do not have to keep putting up with his bullshit. Straight like that. Like I said, man, the Commanders could have really given this nigga a slap in the face by making the Super Bowl and potentially winning it all last season. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Oh boy. All right, the Browns would sign Diontae Johnson. The Packers would sign Isaiah Simmons. I mean, I believe that Robert Saleh was there, and I believe that he is still there as a defensive coordinator. Oh, no. Well, he was there as an assistant. But either way, no, they brought in Jeff Hafley. Yes. Under his system, there's a chance that Isaiah Simmons could flourish, but honestly, I don't know if they are going to continue to move him around as this sort of versatile backer who can play every single position on the field, because as his NFL career has proven so far, he's not really a master in any one aspect when it comes to playing defense. So that's the thing they're going to have to figure out. But honestly, with their front seven being as great as it is already, to have someone with that kind of wild card ability as a backup and not necessarily as a key player, a starting caliber player, hey, more power to them for making it happen. The Steelers would sign Robert Woods. I mean, honestly, I find that pretty interesting. I mean, I suppose with them moving on from Mike Williams and having him leave for the Chargers, it makes sense. I mean, you know, hey, like, it's kind of hard to gauge it because there's literally been a drop-off in every single season. And outside of 2021, he's been relatively healthy. But he just has not performed on the same wavelength as compared to his 2018 and 19 seasons. And obviously, I remember those vividly, having to deal with his ass multiple times a fucking year. Just always clutching up on some crazy shit. But that's neither here nor there. he offers some kind of level head in that locker room. And you need it with that core. You need it. That's what I would say. He can obviously still be a very good third down wide receiver because still he is very proficient in picking up first down. That is one aspect of his game that has not changed. Whenever you need a first down, you know that the ball in clutch time situations to just simply advance the ball and extend a possession, it's going to him. That's going to be there for the Steelers. But to just keep everything somewhat civil in that wide receiver core, you need a veteran presence like Robert Woods. There's no doubt about it. It is crazy to think about, though, that he's only just a few years older than DK, which is, it's pretty crazy. I mean, DK will be 28. I don't know how there is possibly a near 5-year difference between these two. But that's, again, pretty interesting to think about. But from that perspective, it's a solid move to make. Not necessarily a splash move, but the Steelers need to try and just get things to work for them. The 49ers would sign George Kittle to a 4-year, $76.4 million contract extension, making him the highest paid tight end in NFL history by average salary by just $100,000. Because they just had to do that to the Cardinals to spite them. But it's well-deserved for George Kittle. I mean, he's right in his prime, and honestly, when it comes to his age, he's going to be, like, typically it's from 27 to 32, so he's going to be just above that within just a few months. But that's all right, because either way, even though, like, people were trying to say that he had a down season last year, he still had one of the better tight end seasons from a receiving standpoint. And he has been nothing but a consistent guy in the blocking game for them as well. A true all-around tight end who has had 4 1,000-yard seasons to this point, including a couple back-to-back. He's got 45 touchdowns in his career. He's logged 6 Pro Bowls, 2 All-Pro first-team selections, regarded as the best tight end in the league, and also 3 All-Pro second-team nods. Like, literally, as I've said time and time again, whether you think he's 1 or 2, he's one of the top 2 tight ends in the league right now. And he deserves to be paid as such. There's no question about it. The production has been there. The energy he brings to the team has been well documented. It is just about, for him, securing a championship. He, as well as the team, over literally just the past 5 years, they've gotten close. They have gotten close. And they have yet to get the job done, because it is always something in the big game. Whether it was them blowing that lead in the fourth quarter to the Chiefs. They had a 10-point lead, and they blew it. Whether it was them losing to the Chiefs again in overtime in 2024. Like, their game plan, especially defensively in those ball games, were on point. And yet, every single time, victory eluded them. You know, you just want to ensure that you can maximize his time there. And from a production standpoint, yes. From a team success standpoint, there's still a little bit to be desired there, and they have to be able to overcome that. Or it would just suck to see George Kittle end his career without winning one with his consistency at this point. Because that aspect of his game is not going to be questioned. The Saints would release Ben DiNucci. Okay. The Commanders would sign Matt Gay from the Colts. And I believe with them losing, I guess they must have lost Zane Gonzalez then. I guess they also must have moved on from Austin Seibert. I would have to see what their kicker depth looks like. Because if those guys are still there, well, there's no need to take them on. But if both of them left, to get somebody as serviceable as he has been, that's not a problem. The Vikings would sign Andrew Van Ginkel to a 1-year, $23 million contract extension. Honestly, it's a fair one. Because, yes, this is a situation where we are talking about a player in Andrew Van Ginkel who had a career year damn near across the board last season and got himself All-Pro second-team recognition and a Pro Bowl nod after logging 2 interceptions and pick sixes with 6 pass deflections, with a career-high 11.5 sacks and a career-high 79 tackles with 18 TFLs and 19 quarterback hits. While I can see the positives of this thing overall, it makes sense to keep him around for a little bit longer. Obviously, you're not going to move on from that so early on. That would be pretty crazy. You want to have that kind of continuity there. And he has proven, at least for just this last season, that in your defensive scheme, he could be a monster. At the same time, it is just a 1-year contract. Like, he is already 29 years old. He will be 30 on July 1st. If he is truly a player that's seeking out some kind of long-term commitment from a team, he will need to prove this again. He will need to produce like this again. And the Vikings are certainly believing that while he could be a good piece for them, to have this kind of season be replicated might be a little unlikely. When you look at his overall career, he has never produced like this before. Never. This was an astronomically large jump he took last season. Like, just in 2022, he was barely logging starts. He didn't have any sort of impact overall on their defense. He only logged half a sack. And then in 2 years' time, he manages to do that with a new roster. So, hey, they're like, prove it. Prove that you can match, potentially even usurp these numbers for our team this season. That's what that contract says to me. It's a load of money, but again, he does deserve it. At the same time, the long-term commitment could potentially be on the horizon if he replicates this. And they are surely banking on the notion that he may not be able to do so. But he could still be serviceable enough to have around as a great piece for what their scheme calls for. The Steelers would release defensive tackle Montravius Adams. And then we get into another development of the draft that you have already heard about. But to just say, like, I guess, kind of summarize a little bit, for a variety of very complex reasons, Shedeur Sanders got hoed in this draft. I mean, there's no question about what the Titans are going to do with their pick at this point. Obviously, they started off the draft by drafting Cameron Ward. That was the most surefire, predictable number one pick we've had in some time. With every single thing that came out about his connection with that team, the way he interviewed with that team, the way they garnered an appreciation for him, that was to be expected. Shedeur Sanders was not getting drafted over him with that pick. But the madness would ensue right after. I mean, you would think that the Browns would have taken him, but they honestly made the smart choice and went elsewhere with trenches. After trading down. The Giants also had a chance to draft him early and then just didn't. And then with the 9th overall pick, that's exactly where I had Shedeur Sanders mocked. Saints go elsewhere, get a tackle. You get to the 25th overall pick with the Giants legitimately trading back up in the first round. And they get Jackson Dart. At that point, the madness just kicked off from there. Now, granted, with what came out afterwards, apparently Brian Daboll thought that he saw glimpses, flashes of Josh Allen in Jackson Dart, which makes sense because you saw what Brian Daboll did with Josh Allen and turned him into one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So from the standpoint of offensive coordinator, for him to have that kind of offensive mind and have a chance to work with Jackson Dart, maybe they just couldn't pass that up. You can excuse that one. But what you can't excuse is that with literally like the 40th pick, they draft Tyler Shuck from Louisville instead of this nigga. At that point, I'm like, well, okay, what the fuck? Like, there's no shot. Like, bro, even people who don't necessarily know football like that were just so damn confused about this pick. And I am too. Still, to this point, I just could not believe it. This man is going to be 26 years old when the NFL season starts. He is a 7th-year senior, with his best season by far being in Louisville, which is why he got shot up draft boards with the draft combine and everything. Obviously, he was not that healthy in his college career, and obviously with Louisville being his healthiest season, sure, he performed well, but we're talking about a person who played 7 years. Justin Herbert was at Oregon and got drafted way earlier. Trevor Lawrence is still younger than him, I believe. Like, what in the world are we doing? And then not to mention some of the plays that he had during the combine with the drills just left a little to be desired. I'm like, okay, seriously? Like, maybe Shedeur Sanders didn't perform at all, but what the fuck is he doing in some of these specific situations? They just raised eyebrows completely. So we don't necessarily think that Shedeur Sanders is going to be better than him in this situation. We're going to take a chance on a damn near 26-year-old coming out of college after 7 years with barely any production to match that of Shedeur Sanders in way shorter time as well, without any of the injury history, despite him getting banged up at multiple points just last season because of how bad that Colorado offensive line was. So at that point, it became bigger than, just any sort of one set kind of narrative about why he was slotting like this. Now, obviously, the Seahawks had a chance to get him, but I like them taking Milroe over him anyways. The Steelers also had multiple picks in this time, and they even had a chance to go after him because they still didn't have a quarterback to that point, and they passed up on him, drafting other positions of potential need. Like, they got Caleb Johnson at this point, which actually made a lot of sense with them moving on from Najee Harris. But it's like, damn, like, everybody just didn't seem to want him. then the Browns would have another chance in round, like, 4. Yeah, no, round 3, actually, to go after him, and they get Dillon fucking Gabriel. Same thing. Yes, he is the FBS leader in a lot of categories, but this is another individual who is a 6-year senior coming out of college after all that time. And, though the consistency has been there, he's not necessarily been regarded as one, like, I guess with Oregon, he kind of shot up into being one of the better quarterbacks in the nation, but still not necessarily enough to usurp Shedeur Sanders in most people's minds. And speaking of the Browns, even before that, they would draft Dylan Sampson as well, which makes sense because I guess when I double back on it, it's like doubling up on running back is crazy. Because that's probably going to mean that Nick Chubb is gone, which is just a horrible situation. Like, yes, he's in that dreaded age where running backs tend to just die out, but at the same time, Nick Chubb has been nothing but consistent for that team for years. The second he gets hurt and is trying to work his way back into game speed, naturally there's going to be a struggle, but I guess, again, with the way the NFL is, they just don't seem to care. Then again, with the 144th pick, they would finally draft him. And again, doubling up on quarterback could also be seen as pretty wild when you consider how that fucking quarterback room looks right now. But at the same time, it makes sense a little bit. I could give them a little pass because they are truly desperate. Deshaun Watson, they've already acknowledged that it was a fail. And to give Shedeur Sanders a chance in a room with Kenny Pickett, with Joe Flacco, and with Dillon Gabriel alongside him is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. If Shedeur Sanders can truly lock in and take advantage of the moment, understand that this could be seen as a humbling experience and, carry himself a little better. Like, he could work himself into a legitimate role with this team, which is honestly all you're asking for if you're in his shoes at this point. Because even the Browns just acknowledged as well with what Andrew Berry was saying, bro. Like, that, it was a fuck it pick. Like, they didn't even look ecstatic to make the selection. They panned the camera over to their fucking draft war room, rather, and they were just fucking clapping while just having these blank smiles on their faces and blank stares. Like, what the fuck? Like, they didn't even look ecstatic to make the damn pick. It's just like, okay, we did it. He's off the board. I guess. I don't know. Like, what? But in the midst of all that, another story surrounding this overarching issue would develop, as there would be a person, initially it was unknown at the time, who prank called Shedeur Sanders over the phone and told him that he was going to be drafted, then would retract the statement after a little bit of back and forth, I guess, saying, I guess you're going to have to wait a little longer, and just hang up the phone. Little did we know at the time that this person actually decided to record the exchange on his end as he was talking to Shedeur Sanders, and the individual in question would be none other than the son of Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich's son, in Jax Ulbrich. Major debates would ensue about what the NFL, and by and large the team even, should do about this, because you have to question how Ulbrich even has access to Shedeur Sanders' phone number in the first place. But at the same time, why would you be compelled, as the son of a person who works directly in the space of the NFL as a coordinator for a legitimate team, to do that to a player in the first place? And then you record it on your end for what exactly? What does that truly do for you? I don't know. Because at that point, it just made it even clearer, and they cracked down on that shit instantly. Made it much easier to figure out who you are. And still, this isn't necessarily something that you would do to Shedeur Sanders' face. Or Deion Sanders' face, for that matter. You wouldn't dare do it to them in their face. But you feel emboldened. You feel a sense of, I guess, pride in trying to do that shit over the phone like a punk would. But that's neither here nor there. Anyways, earlier on in the morning, they would actually release some news on punishments. And they would state that the NFL would fine Jeff Ulbrich $100,000 and fine the Falcons $250,000 for this leak and this incident. Honestly, it's certainly safe to say that, I guess you can't necessarily go with biggest loser. It's a sad, pretty fucked up situation all around. To have Shedeur Sanders, bro, even if he can shake that off and respond to it well, he's still going to have to hold that for quite some time. That's not something that just leaves you. It's ridiculous, man. Getting drafted, and especially when he ended up actually getting drafted, was a huge moment in his life. Not only is that screwing around with his mindset, but also all the family around him as well. Even they were confused about what the hell was going on. They did not even know what he was talking about. So it's you can't imagine how they were dealing with this in the moment as well. But when it comes to Jeff Ulbrich, we're talking about a person who just got there. He was just hired by the Falcons this offseason. This is a new role for him. And, him being the defensive coordinator, maybe it's not necessarily his responsibility to have connections to any sort of offensive anything. But the fact that you get that information and then you don't do your job of guarding it as best as you can, I can't even imagine how they would be able to entrust him with anything else. There's always going to be a bit of gray area there. There's always going to be some sort of drawback in their minds of relaying information to this man. Because if you can't handle that, we start giving out much more sensitive and even more risque, confidential information that needs to be kept on the hush and kept within the confines of the organization to you. Knowing that this is something that can happen. That's just a rough spot to be in for him and the organization in large. But it's fair. And I guess both of them would state that they would apologize. I guess both of them went on and did it online. But honestly, still, that's not enough. There was something saying that they would arrange, I guess, a meetup between Sanders and Jax Ulbrich so that he could convey his apology in real life. And that is honestly what I was saying as soon as I saw or even heard that happened. Because I'm like, bruh, go and stand that man face to face and apologize. Doing that shit over the internet doesn't necessarily mean anything. You gotta own up to that and stand up to it man to man. Not behind a camera, not over a phone. Handle that in real life and apologize. straight like that. It seems like that's the direction that they are taking. But if they don't, yeah, there's going to be a problem with that. That's all I'll say. And then also news would break just a little bit earlier today as well that former Florida State quarterback Jordan Travis would retire from the NFL. It's a pretty wild situation all around. Apparently, his leg injury is still something that is nagging him at this moment, and after further consultation, he just decided that it would be best to just give up on playing. It's been a crazy last couple years for him, if we want to be completely honest here. I mean, he is literally regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in college football in 2023, heading into at least the last couple of weeks or so. They lose him for the rest of the season due to this similar leg injury that has kept him out for all this time. And as a result, even though they finished the season undefeated, Florida State, in that year, they still have to suffer for the notion that they're not going to be as strong of a team compared to some of the other people in the Final Four at that point, just because Jordan Travis isn't in. And there's all of the fallout over that. Then you have him tweeting out that is like, damn, maybe he shouldn't have gotten injured, or something like that, so they could see just how great the team truly is. Like, that tweet was certainly an interesting one in time. But it's like, damn, that certainly hit hard for many people over the college football landscape. And then obviously Florida State, again, just continues to drop off over the course of the year that followed, honestly. As Mike Norvell just continues to go through it, then Jordan Travis gets drafted, doesn't even play a single snap in the league at all, because he's still dealing with this injury at this point. And it's too much to bear to where he just has to retire without ever being able to perform on the pro level. That's just as damn sad trajectory. But again, the most important thing above all is the health. Like, that consultation had to reveal something very, very deep in the view of Jordan Travis. Because you're that young dealing with something like that could affect you long term. You don't want to put yourself in a spot where you just make that problem worse. And then before you're even in your physical prime, you can't even necessarily do all the things you want to do because of your immobilities at that point. It's about keeping that in order. So, it's definitely something that is rough, but it is what is best for him at this point of time. He's got to get healthier. There's still much that he can do when given the chance to get healthier. But it's about undergoing that path first, because he's just not been there yet for years now. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.